Hello and a very warm welcome. It's 9 PM IST and we are coming to you live from the WION headquarters in Noida, India. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Let's get started. Antony Blinken has said that Israel has effectively lost sovereignty in the northern part of its country due to persistent cross-border attacks by Hezbollah. What are the implications of that statement? Why is it significant? And is an Israeli invasion of Lebanon now inevitable? On Gravitas tonight, we tell you why this question is being asked and the implications of the latest developments from on the ground. And here's a look at what else is lined up for you on the show. We tell you all about a new explosive developed in India. It is being called one of the most powerful non-nuclear explosives in the world. We get you all the details. Dengue is surging worldwide. We get you a Gravitas special report. We tell you all about the gold buying frenzy in Vietnam and Thailand. Severe turbulence on board a flight injured 30 passengers. One passenger got stuck in the overhead bin. We tell you what happened. All this and more coming up tonight. Is an Israeli invasion of Lebanon inevitable? Despite efforts by the US to tame down the possibility of a war between Israel and Hezbollah, all signs on the ground suggest that it is inevitable. On Monday, in fact, America's top diplomat inadvertently confirmed this possibility. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken admitted that the U.S. sees momentum building towards a war between Israel and Hezbollah. Speaking at an event in Washington, Blinken said that Israel has effectively lost sovereignty in the northern part of the country due to persistent cross-border attacks by Hezbollah. Now, that is a significant statement and it's a big admission. The question is Blinken admitting that Israel has lost control of a part of its territory to Hezbollah? Will Israel avenge this by invading Lebanon, where Hezbollah is based? No wonder then the Biden administration has been working furiously in recent weeks to stop a wider conflict. You see, Blinken's comments come as Israel has signaled a military downshift in Gaza. Israel has been refocusing its resources to the northern border, where it has exchanged near daily fire with the Iran-backed Hezbollah group. Although the two sides have traded fire since the beginning of the Gaza war, tensions spiked to the point that Iran issued a new threat after weeks of being silent. That's right. Tehran threatened that an Israeli invasion of Lebanon would trigger an obliterating war. In a post on social media last Friday, Iran's mission to the United Nations said that Tehran warned that all options, including the full involvement of all resistance fronts, are on the table. As per the data collected by the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, ACLED, and reported by Al Jazeera, there have been over 7,000 cross-border attacks between Israel and Lebanon since October 7, 2023. Those watching the conflict closely are convinced that in the absence of a ceasefire deal in Gaza, a large-scale Israel versus Hezbollah war will break out in the next several weeks, one that experts fear would be far more dangerous today than the last time around. Now, the international community, of course, is concerned. This week, the escalating tensions on the Israel-Lebanese border prompted Germany, the Netherlands and Canada to urge their citizens to leave Lebanon as soon as possible via the commercial flights still operating in the country. Meanwhile, Lufthansa Group halted night flights to and from Beirut until 31st of July. Swiss Airlines also moving the Beirut night flights to daytime. The US has been trying hard to diffuse the tensions. It has also issued a travel advisory for the US citizens, urging them to strongly reconsider travel to Lebanon. Now, Blinken says that the US is determined to prevent the conflict. He says that both sides do not want a wider war, but that analysis has been made based on the present conditions. If the war in Gaza has taught us anything, it is that developments in West Asia are highly dynamic. Restraint does not mean that Hezbollah and Israel do not want war. Rather, it could mean that both Hezbollah and Israel's leadership are currently confronted by a range of constraints that have put the brakes on a conflict for now. But the thing is, these constraints are already breaking down. When former Israeli War Cabinet member Benny Gantz declared last week that Israel can plunge Lebanon completely into the dark, he was serious. It won't be difficult for Israel to plunge Lebanon into darkness. Lebanon's power grid, already crippled by the country's economic collapse, barely functions as it is. If Israel strikes it, it will easily finish it off. However, taking apart Hezbollah's military power in days is a far taller task. Since its inconclusive war with the Lebanese militant group in 2006, Israel has been planning for a rematch, and so has Hezbollah. The Iran-backed group's arsenal includes at least 150,000 missiles and rockets. The sophistication of Hezbollah's attacks even surprised Israeli officials. Hezbollah has demonstrated systematic pinpoint strikes on Israel's surveillance outposts along the border. They have shot down high-flying, top-of-the-line Israeli drones. They have hit Israel's Iron Dome batteries and anti-drone defenses. And then last month, they left the biggest surprise for Israel when they published a 9-minute-long drone footage of Israel's highly sensitive civilian and military infrastructure. Let's not forget here, Hezbollah can reportedly field between 40,000 and 50,000 fighters. Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah recently said that they have more than 100,000 fighters, many of whom have gained combat experience fighting alongside regime forces in the Syria civil war. As a fighting force, it is highly trained and disciplined. Ultimately, we are talking about the world's most powerful non-state militia. Hezbollah is, remember, far more powerful than Hamas. In the event of a war, both sides will be able to inflict significant pain on the other. And on the other side of the border, Israel's top generals have become war-weary in a way. They are prepared to begin a ceasefire in Gaza, even if that means Hamas remains in power for the time being. The generals also think their forces need time to recover, knowing that a land war with Hezbollah is likely. Nearly 9 months into a war that Israel did not plan for, its army is short on munitions, motivation. And this is where the Israeli military and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu diverge. Netanyahu, as we know, has opposed a truce that would allow Hamas to survive the war, but Netanyahu is running out of options as well. Publicly, Israel has said that it is prepared for an all-out war with Hezbollah. Looking across West Asia, the strategic balance that for so long favored Israel seems to be changing. It is surrounded by an array of non-state actors, from Hezbollah to Hamas to Islamic Jihad to the Houthis to militias in Iraq and Syria, all pleading allegiance to Iran. An all-out war could lead to mass civilian deaths in both Lebanon as well as Israel. It will also see the US getting pulled into a larger regional conflict, perhaps. Will then Netanyahu risk going to war with Hezbollah? The next few weeks are crucial and will determine a lot. Our next story is about a new explosive. It's not an ordinary one. In fact, it is one of the most powerful non-nuclear explosives in the world. Let me say that again. One of the most powerful non-nuclear explosives in the world. As per an Economic Times report, India has successfully developed and certified this new explosive. And what is known about this explosive, you ask? How significant is this development? What is the takeaway? And what does it mean for India? First things first, as per the report, this is a high-performance explosive. It is 2.01 times more lethal than standard TNT and is one of the most powerful non-nuclear explosives in the world. Now, let's just take a step back here. TNT stands for trinitrotoluene. Explosives which are used in conventional or non-nuclear warheads are measured in TNT equivalents. While an explosive's performance is measured in terms of the TNT equivalents, explosive performance is gauged by TNT equivalents, with higher values basically meaning greater lethality. So basically, the explosives having higher TNT equivalents have more lethality and destructive power as well. And this explosive that has been developed has double the lethality of TNT. So this is a very significant takeaway, and it could prove to be a game changer, just to put it simply. For context here, as of now, the most powerful conventional explosive used in India, specifically in the BrahMos warhead, has a TNT equivalence of about 1.50. Most conventional warheads worldwide have a TNT equivalence ranging from 1.25 to 1.30. In fact, SEBEX-2 has reportedly been granted a compliance certificate by the Navy under the Defense Export Promotion Scheme. The report says the newly formulated explosive has undergone extensive testing and certification by the Navy, and that it has the potential to significantly enhance the destructive power of bombs, artillery shells, and warheads without adding extra weight. Also, that the development of the explosive will enhance the potency and efficiency of weapons and ammunition in use. In fact, a total of 3 new explosive formulations have been developed by Economic Explosives Limited. That's a subsidiary of the Nagpur-based Solar Industries. As per the company officials, the 3 new explosive formulations can prove to be a game changer for our armed forces because of the sheer enhancement of firepower and the explosive effect. SEBEX-2 is a new explosive formulation that provides a much more powerful blast effect than any currently available solid explosive. This is a major advancement and a major boost for India. And speaking of all things deadly, let's talk about Pakistan, where if you blaspheme, you die. On Tuesday, dozens of citizens in Karachi rallied against the use and misuse of blasphemy laws, as well as the wrongful conviction and death sentences awarded under it. What triggered that protest, you ask? It was a Pakistani court's decision to impose death sentence on a Christian man charged with posting blasphemous posts on social media. The man in question is one Ehsan Raja Masih. His controversial arrest in August 2023 came after fierce sectarian violence in Jaranwala, Punjab. Groups of Muslim men have burned down dozens of homes and churches in Jaranwala after some residents claimed they saw 2 Christian men tearing out pages from the Quran. They alleged that the Christian men threw the holy book on the ground and wrote insulting remarks on other pages. The 2 men were later arrested. No casualties were reported at the time, but terrified Christians fled their homes to safer areas. Though the police arrested more than 100 suspects following the attacks, none of them have been convicted so far. Rather, 188 of them have been set free by the court either on want of evidence against them or on bail. Now, fast forward to last Saturday. Anti-terrorism court special judge pronounced the death sentence against one Ehsan Raja Masih and imposed a fine of 1 million rupees on him. Ehsan, though not party to the desecration, was accused of reposting the defaced pages of the Quran on his TikTok account. His lawyer says that they will appeal against the death sentence. Ehsan was also handed down a total of 22 years of imprisonment under various sections of the Pakistan Penal Code, the Anti-Terrorism Act and the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act. Amir Farooq, the police officer who first arrested Ehsan, accused him of sharing hateful content at a sensitive time, when the Pakistan authorities were already struggling to contain the violence. Naturally, the extreme measure led to massive outrage in Pakistan. The local Christian community said that what Ehsan did cannot be justified. But why did the court have to order such an extreme verdict, especially when those linked to the attacks are yet to be punished, is the question being raised. The chairman of All Minorities Alliance, Akmal Bhatti, said that even though a year had passed, not a single conviction had been made so far against the men accused of torching the churches and houses of Christians. And we are not surprised, by the way. Blasphemy is punishable by death in Pakistan, remember. It is also common because blasphemy laws are often misused to target religious minorities in the country. But even though blasphemy convictions are common in Pakistan, no one has ever been executed. Most convictions are thrown out on appeal by higher courts. But mobs have in the past lynched suspects before they could even be put on trial. As per Human Rights Watch, at least 65 people have reportedly been killed in Pakistan over claims of blasphemy. Since 1990, expanding the use of blasphemy cases against people for what they say or share on social media has in a way become an invitation for witch hunts. What does the Pakistan government have to say? Nothing much. Following the incident, the government made tall claims and promised that not a single suspect would be spared. But as the Christian community took to the streets on Tuesday, not a word has come from Islamabad. Critics argue that it's high time the Pakistani government amends and ultimately repeals the blasphemy laws. But the Pakistani government has failed to adequately protect minorities. And as a result, Pakistan ranks 7th on the Open Doors World Watch list, indicating that it is 7th most dangerous country in the world for Christians due to the high levels of persecution and discrimination that they face in the country. In a recent statement, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, Kurt Campbell, announced that Washington is shifting its focus towards recruiting more STEM students from India rather than China. This move reportedly arises from growing security concerns in the U.S. and efforts to limit Chinese nationals' access to sensitive technology. STEM, as you may be aware, stands for science, technology, engineering and maths. Now, why is this shift significant? Campbell described India as an increasingly important U.S. security partner, highlighting the strategic value of strengthening educational ties with Indian students. Campbell emphasized that while the U.S. remains open to welcoming Chinese students, it would prefer they focus on humanities and social sciences rather than STEM fields. According to reports in the U.S., in the academic year 2022 to 23, there were around 290,000 Chinese students enrolled in U.S. universities as compared to roughly 269,000 Indian students. However, experts argue that security tensions between Washington and Beijing have led to unwarranted discrimination against Chinese students. And looking at the participation in STEM courses, there were a total of 122,101 international students participating in science, technology, engineering and mathematics in 2023. According to the Department of US Homeland Security, most students participating in STEM were from India, which accounted for 39.1%. Participation of students from China, meanwhile, accounted for 23.7%. Now, under the Trump administration, the U.S. introduced the China Initiative, which was aimed at combating Chinese espionage and intellectual property theft. This basically led to severe concerns about racial profiling. Under President Biden, this initiative ended, but Campbell said that U.S. universities still make careful attempts to support Chinese students while safeguarding sensitive areas like laboratories. Campbell underscored the need to recruit more international STEM students, particularly from India, which is an increasingly important U.S. security partner. The move is made in order to address the shortage of Americans studying these fields, and he expressed optimism that increasing the number of Indian students in technology programs could fill this gap. While emphasizing on the importance of maintaining ties with China, Campbell pointed out that China is to blame for any fallout in academic, business or non-profit sector ties. Campbell basically said, and I'm quoting, "It really has been China that has made it difficult for the kinds of activities that we would like to see sustaining." This new policy direction has sparked significant discussion within academic and civil communities. Some argue that the strained US-China relations and intensified scrutiny are stifling scientific collaboration. You might have seen people lining up to buy gold for a wedding or as a gift. The yellow metal, after all, is the perfect gift. But that is not the reason for the latest gold buying frenzy that's unfolding in several parts of the world. Take a look at our next report to find out more.
Anxious citizens from Thailand to Vietnam are flocking to buy gold. Why? Gold is usually considered a safe bet during turbulent times. The dollar strength is weighing on global currencies. The impact of currency devaluation is larger on emerging markets. That, in turn, is pushing people to buy gold. Global inflation and geopolitical uncertainty are other factors at play. People are queuing up at gold stores to protect themselves against their local currency depreciation. Small investors are feeling the pinch even more on their savings. Because of the demand for the yellow metal, prices have surged to record highs. Gold hit a life high of $2,450 an ounce this year. Still, investors are betting more on gold. Even in China. Why? The property and the stock market crisis is driving the demand. Gold is seen as a reliable asset in Asia. The precious metal is treated more than just an asset or an investment, particularly in Southeast Asia due to those deep-rooted beliefs. Central banks too around Asia are piling into gold to add to their reserves. According to a survey conducted, 80% of central banks are planning to increase their gold reserves over the next year. Typically, high US interest rates suppress gold prices, but gold has defied that. Current trends indicate broader concerns such as global inflation and geopolitical tensions, which outweigh high global rates. In Asian markets, investors are breaking their usual habit of buying gold only when prices are low. Instead, they are choosing to buy gold even at record high prices. Historically, Vietnam and Thailand have been some of Southeast Asia's biggest gold buyers, while China and India have dominated the wider regional market. If we talk about Vietnam, There are long queues outside state-owned banks as locals rush to buy gold. The Vietnamese dong has depreciated for well over a decade now. What's not helping is the high inflation rate from global supply chain concerns. Vietnam's inflation rate touched 4.4% in May, its highest level since early 2023. The scenario is similar in Thailand. Thailand's inflation too has surged. The latest figure shows the highest rate since April last year. Meanwhile, in places like Singapore and similar stable places, gold serves as a lucrative bet against potential interest rate shifts. This reflects a global economic landscape where uncertainties drive investments. Bureau Report WION World is One.
After a gap of 11 years, this weekend the Indian team lifted an international cricket tournament trophy, but so far the trophy and the triumphant team have not returned home. And why is that? Because Beryl, a catastrophic hurricane that's been battering the Caribbean islands, has led to the imposition of a total shutdown in multiple island nations in the region. Experts are warning that Hurricane Beryl could just be the start of an intense season with possibilities of more such disasters. Here's why this is concerning. Take a look.
This is a view of Hurricane Beryl, as seen by astronauts aboard the International Space Station from 400 kilometers above the Earth. The already severe Category 4 storm has further intensified into a Category 5 storm. In fact, Category 5 is used to refer to the most destructive storms. That's the last and final category on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. As it passed by the Caribbean islands, the storm unleashed torrential rainfall, gusty winds measuring around 240 kilometers per hour, and devastating floods. It left a complete trail of destruction. So far, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines have borne the brunt. From buildings to power lines to communication cables, complete havoc was wreaked in just a few hours. This meant that all these islands had to be without power, communications and even running water. Gradually, efforts are underway to restore the essentials in a phased manner. While Barbados has not been as severely hit as the other islands, the surging waves damaged multiple fishing vessels. A large number of tourists who visited Barbados to catch the final game of the Cricket T20 World Cup are also stuck. It's not just the cricket lovers and fans. Even the Indian team that won the T20 World Cup this weekend has been stranded in Barbados. As a result of Hurricane Beryl, the Grantley Adams International Airport was forced to suspend operations. However, the Indian team is likely to commence their return journey as the airport is expected to resume operations. The Category 5 hurricane is on track for Jamaica. There's one aspect that's caused a lot of concern amid weather watchers. Beryl is said to be the earliest Category 5 hurricane on record and only the second Atlantic storm of such strength to be recorded in July. As a matter of fact, the hurricane season is just about getting started. All indications point towards the impact of climate change in a world that's warming up owing to human-driven activities. Extreme weather events are becoming the new normal. Here's how it happens. Hurricanes come to life because of warm oceans. Usually the oceans are at the warmest in the later parts of the year, around September, which is the peak hurricane season. However, with temperatures in the Atlantic rising well ahead of the usual season, the conditions are perfect for hurricane formation and intensification. Clearly, things don't look good. Forecasters are warning that this year's hurricane season is going to be abnormally active. National Weather Service forecasters predict 17 to 25 storms this season, and there's a possibility that 13 of them could end up as hurricanes.
At the end of a plane journey, you could be tired, jet-lagged or sleepy. But these days, we are hearing of head, neck and chest injuries following a flight. In the latest, an Air Europa flight from Spain to Uruguay encountered severe turbulence. This was a Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner. As it flew carrying 325 passengers, the plane was hit by turbulence over the Atlantic as it neared Brazil's coast. Videos and pictures from within the cabin are scary. Some of the passengers suffered head, neck and chest injuries. Some seats reportedly had blood stains. Many passengers ended up fracturing their limbs. Around 30 people were injured in the incident alone. Passengers were tossed around. One passenger reportedly got stuck in the overhead bin. Following the mid-air turbulence that injured a significant number of passengers, the flight made an emergency landing in the city of Natal, Brazil. Dozens of people were treated for their injuries and some had to remain in hospital. A few weeks earlier, there was a similar incident involving a Singapore Airlines flight, remember? We told you about this. The plane had dropped more than 6,000 feet in a span of minutes. More than 70 people on that flight were injured. An elderly person lost his life. In most cases, the onboard weather radar of the plane or the data from the ground-based radars can offer alerts about bad weather and turbulence and heavy clouds. However, the major issue is a phenomenon called CAT, clear air turbulence. This is the turbulence that is not visible to radars. Researchers say that the instances of clear air turbulence have increased significantly in the North Atlantic. This phenomenon has seen a steady rise over the last 4 decades. It occurs when there is a change in the wind direction in or around the jet stream, a fast-flowing river of air that is typically found at 30,000 to 60,000 feet altitudes. The climate crisis is not only making the planet hotter, it is also making us sicker. A record 10 million people who have fallen ill with dengue so far this year. This is an unprecedented surge. And it is fueled in part by climate change. Soaring global temperatures bringing dengue to places it has not been in historically, like the Americas. While those of us in South Asia are aware of the dangers of dengue, medical professionals in the US are ringing the alarm bells. Are we prepared to deal with this is the question. Here's what we know so far. It's already a record-breaking year for dengue infections in Central and South America. As the summer weather and vacation travel heat up, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention warning of an increased risk of the mosquito-borne virus in the US. This week, the CDC told healthcare providers to be on the lookout and to test for cases. Meanwhile, Puerto Rico seeing a major outbreak. It has declared a public health emergency with over 1,500 cases reported by mid-June, anticipating more due to the hot and rainy season. Scientists saying that the soaring global temperatures have accelerated the life cycles and expanded the ranges of the mosquitoes that carry dengue, and this is helping spread the virus to roughly 1 in every 800 people on the planet in the past 6 months alone. The rise in the number of dengue fever patients has overwhelmed hospitals across the planet, and now public health officials are preparing for the virus to crop up in more temperate regions, including the southernmost portions of the United States. Experts have already alerted the officials across the US that the outbreak will hit them next. As per the World Health Organization, dengue remains one of the most neglected diseases in the world. As scientists have found no cure for the virus, it can lead to plasma leaking from veins, internal bleeding, organ failure, and in rare instances, death. In the US, a vaccine is available for children of the age of 9 to 16 years old, and the same vaccine would not be available after 2026. Experts, in fact, have warned that if it is not controlled, there are chances of 2 billion people across the world getting dengue in the next 50 years. In the tropical regions across Latin America, Africa and Asia, where dengue once circulated primarily during the summer months, a lengthening warm season is turning the disease into a year-round phenomenon. After days of talks and dramatic twists following South Africa's election mandate, the new government has finally announced the coalition cabinet. But the unity government has received a quote-unquote cautiously optimistic reaction from the people, as hopes of change remain low. But fear of political instability remains high. Here's a detailed report.
The following appointments to the executive.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced his new coalition cabinet, including a job for the leader of what was the largest opposition party, the Democratic Alliance.
The Minister of Agriculture is John Steenhuisen.
Hello, how are you doing?
Ramaphosa's African National Congress was forced to join with rival parties to stay in power after losing its parliamentary majority for the first time in 3 decades in a May 29th election. And Sunday's announcement has followed weeks of protracted and at times acrimonious negotiations. Political analyst and former South African diplomat Melanie Verwoerd said what had emerged was a major shake-up with very few of the old faces still in there.
Like John Steenhuisen in agriculture, I don't know what he knows about agriculture apart from that you buy chickens in supermarkets. But I do understand why the DA fought for that. I think it's because they want to get some of the Freedom Front voters. That's one of the few growth points still for the DA.
Freedom Front is a smaller party with its base in white Afrikaans-speaking voters. The markets, which had welcomed inclusion of the business-friendly DA in South Africa's coalition government, responded favourably to the new cabinet. South African assets rose sharply on Monday. Some investors, however, said the gains were likely short-lived, as it would take time for the new government's agenda and performance to become clear. The reaction on the streets of Johannesburg was more mixed. While some welcomed the diverse and inclusive makeup of the executive, others, like Gomelemo Utemeleng, questioned the mix of different people with different philosophies.
I'm not really confident about it, but then they say the people of South Africa have spoken. Is that what they say they wanted? That's my question. I don't really support it fully, but hey, what can we do? Because at this point I feel like we've spoken, but we're not being listened to.
Alongside the DA, Ramaphosa has made space for 5 other coalition parties in his cabinet. But now that the wrangling over portfolios is over, the government faces the more daunting task of governing. That's in the face of a struggling economy, crumbling roads and power stations, and high unemployment. Whether the coalition of former enemies can improve on the ANC's record may depend, analysts have said, on the extent to which they can set aside their ideological differences.
Let's now talk about something which was long overdue. London's historic Garrick Club has opened its doors for women after 193 years of its existence. Movie stars Judi Dench and Sian Phillips have been enrolled as the first 2 female members of what was once considered a men-only establishment. The 2 women were given